Hey, welcome everybody to another edition of Let's Talk About It. This is Susan Johnson, and my co-host is off doing great things as he's running for office this time for the Willimantic Taxing District. So Dennis O'Brien will be back after the election, but right now I have a wonderful guest who is going to tell us all kinds of things, great things about what she's been doing and all the things she's done for the town. And I just can't be happy enough to introduce Paula Haney, who sits on the Board of Education, used to be on the Board of Finance, and has done so many great things for the town. But also, she's a physical therapist, and she has a great medical background. And some of the things that she's done includes working with the Arthritis Foundation. And I just am so pleased that you're here to join us celebrating the 75th anniversary of the Arthritis Foundation. So welcome to the show, Paula.
Oh, Susan, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to have an opportunity to talk with you and share things that are going on in the community and certainly in our state. Yes, it's been wonderful working with the Arthritis Foundation. It's an excellent organization, and it is indeed celebrating its 75th year. Amazing, and especially when we look back over 75 years to the change in the treatments, the change in how our patients with doctor-diagnosed arthritis have none of the extreme disabilities and contractures that we used to see with patients years ago. Even when I started in physical therapy years ago, we had patients who their joint damage was so intense that they lost their mobility. Many children, yes, children get arthritis too, and those kids usually were not able to play soccer. My goodness, many of them over time were in wheelchairs.
Exactly. Well, why don't we start with the different types of arthritis, because sometimes we just use that term arthritis, and there are different types of arthritis, and I think it would be helpful because some people don't think in terms of children having arthritis.
That's
but
right.
it is an immune disorder, and what it does is your immune system does attack your bones and so on and so forth. But there's all kinds of different aspects to it, and I know you are a very good expert. So let's start off with let's go to from the most common to the least common.
Okay. The most common that people know about is osteoarthritis, which in and of itself isn't an autoimmune disease, but in fact is a degenerative joint disease, which can occur because of the way someone's joints are made. So that would be, from birth. It could be trauma from accidents or injuries. Matter of fact, osteoarthritis rates as the third highest cause of discharge from the military for our soldiers because of the huge packs that they're required to have, certainly the injuries that they can sustain in war zones. So yes, it's huge, but we see it in our athletes, and we see it in everyday life. We always thought of arthritis as an elder's condition. But in fact, we know that our UConn basketball players have sustained arthritic related injuries, and certainly that is a byproduct of a lot of our athletics.
So a lot of physical things that people do, whether it's athletics or some types of work, where you would have regular use of a hand in a particular way. Maybe how you're holding your hand on your computer, for example, might create arthritis. Or there are other, like people who play musical instruments a lot.
Usually, yes, we refer to OA as a wear and tear disease. Exactly.
Yes.
So yes, it can be very much an occupation-related condition as well.
And then there's and you were mentioning the little ones, and that is more of an autoimmune deficiency.
That's right. Then we get into the autoimmune diseases, and that's, we know, mostly rheumatoid arthritis, for
Right.
instance. Lots of folks, lots of elders get, not elders, adults get rheumatoid arthritis, an autoimmune disease. But then children can be diagnosed with juvenile rheumatoid arthritis. Children as early as months old can be diagnosed. And a lot of times, depending on where you are in this country, if there aren't pediatric rheumatologists, sometimes children go for years without being properly diagnosed. And that's when joint damage can really set in.
Yeah, so this raises some really very interesting questions in terms of when you get diagnosed, what kind of treatment, how might, let's start with your profession as a physical therapist. In terms of physical therapy, there might be ways to adjust the way you move to limit the pain or continue the deterioration of the joint.
We have found, even in osteoarthritis, which we probably have the least amount of control over in terms of its degeneration and its progression, we do know that there are a couple of things that really impact OA, and that can be weight. Not necessarily how much you weigh, but if you tend to change your weight a lot, people who diet and then they lose a lot of weight and then they gain it back, sometimes that can impact OA. Certainly, if you're weak, the most important thing you can do for your joints, especially when you have OA, is to keep your muscle strength. As long as you keep those muscles good and strong, they're going to protect your joints.
Oh, this is very, very interesting, because this is something that I think is one of the most important things as we get older, is increasing your strength, or at least maintaining the strength. So some people, I weight trained for years and years, but have gone kind of off the rails, so to speak, with weight training since COVID. I have a little gym in my house, but it's not the same as going and doing all the weight training that I did before COVID. And I think that just walking sometimes can help with some of these muscles, and making sure that the circulation is moving as it should. Through from movement through the veins, and then of course pumped back through the system, so and the arteries. So tell us a little bit about that muscle strength, and what people could do. Just listening to us, what would be the best thing? Would it be to start off walking?
Walking is an excellent means of exercise. It does help, especially if you already have sore joints. Watch where you're walking. Sometimes walking on pavement can be more difficult on the joints. So if you can find a nice trail, a nice place where tracks around the high school football field, for instance.
Oh, that's a good spot. Yeah, it's good for the joints. Yes.
That's a much better way. Don't stress. You want to be able to start your program gently. Don't go right into a lot of heavy resistance. We're now going to start putting strain on muscles and joints. So you want to start easy, and probably being consistent is another important piece.
Regular walking. And what about footwear? Should there be some good cushiony footwear?
Yep, it's always good to have a good supportive shoe. You want to protect those feet. There's no getting away from your feet, especially if they're sore. So you want to make sure that you have good arch support and a nice cushion, especially around the heel.
And of course, when you look at that arch support, and you look at perhaps, now I know one of the things that might, cause a problem, and one of the things when I think about arch support, the right kind of shoe, is the pronation, where the foot goes off a little bit to the side. And when you have a pronation, it can have an impact on your knee joints and perhaps even your back.
They're all related.
Oh, yes.
We always heard that, the hip bone's connected to the knee bone.
I love that. Thank you. Yeah.
It's certainly
if
true.
I could sing, I'd sing the song.
Oh, go part. But truly, how our feet are positioned definitely affects our knees, which then in turn can affect our hips and ultimately our backs. I mean, it all it's all matched up.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. But I did want to get that in there because I think when we're talking about wear and tear, like an osteoarthritis, wear and tear on the joints, all these things can come into play. So if you start having those, symptoms of discomfort, I mean, this is a time to go to the doctor and get an order for physical therapy and look at what kinds of braces, what kinds of shoes you might want to do to mitigate the wear and tear on the joints.
That's right. Taking care of your joints, supporting your joints. Yep.
And the biggest
Joint
thing
protection.
is muscles, muscles, muscles.
That's right. That's right.
Very, very good.
And that does lead into some of the other types of arthritis. For
Yes.
instance, ankylosing spondylitis, which
yes.
severely affects the spine. And then you're talking about things that have effects as a result of that is because of the difficulty in the back, you start losing your ability to stand up straight, to bring your shoulders back, which then affects your vital capacity and your ability to have your lungs working properly. So that's an effect of that. Psoriatic arthritis.
Yes. Well, ankylosing spondylitis is something that's very, very difficult, and also is part of sometimes a genetic test can make a decision about whether or not you'd have ankylosing spondylitis.
Yes, many of the autoimmune diseases usually have a genetic marker
Yes.
that is indicative of the potential for coming down with one of the diseases.
Ankylosing spondylitis also can affect your vision.
Okay.
I actually have been studying it. My brother has ankylosing spondylitis.
Oh, really?
Yes, yeah. So
Okay.
that's been a real concern, and in our family, because I was tested for it as well, because I have a little scoliosis, which isn't considered to be ankylosing spondylitis. So, but he tested positive for the genome test. So.
I know there are, even with children, vision can definitely be impacted.
Yes, yeah. So that was one of the things. Go ahead. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I thought it was
that's
interesting to find out that a lot of these immune deficiency disorders can actually be tested now with genetic testing.
Another way we've come so far.
This is big, though, to be able to do that. Now, the next thing I hope that we do. What was the next one after ankylosing spondylitis?
Psoriatic arthritis.
Psoriatic arthritis. Yes, please go into that one. They do a lot of advertisements on TV with psoriatic arthritis.
Well, and that's kind of personal for me because one of my sons was diagnosed with psoriatic arthritis probably about 10 years ago. And it affects the joints, as all arthritis does, but it also affects the skin.
Yes.
And
Psoriasis.
that can be extremely painful and embarrassing, and set yourself up for infection, being that they're open wounds. So yeah, that's a tough one, and that affects primarily the hands, the feet, and the back.
And that's very, very difficult. The hands and the feet and the back, I mean, that's how we all get around.
Exactly.
So that's very, very difficult. And then to have the skin problem to go along with it, I mean, and I wonder, when that's diagnosed, is it because of maybe of something that happens with the skin and a dermatologist finds it? Or
Well, very possibly. In our case, our personal case, my son was playing semi-pro football. And of course, at the end of the season, you're always banged up and swollen. But he came to me one day and he says, "Mom, my hands are just so swollen." And he had the very characteristic sausage-like swelling of his fingers. And that was a sign for us.
I see. And you were, of course, able to identify it because of your background. But that is
And off he went to a rheumatologist.
very, very good. Very good. And so that is for the little ones, when the little ones have arthritis, tell us about that. And are there things that the parents can do to make sure their muscle strength is good to limit the pain?
Well, I think we are very fortunate in the state of Connecticut to have some pretty incredible pediatric rheumatologists. Not all of our states are that lucky. Matter of fact, will be talking about the event tomorrow night, and one of the honorees for tomorrow night is Dr. Lawrence Zemmel, who was probably one of the first pediatric rheumatologists
Wow.
in our state.
That's fabulous.
And I think getting that diagnosis is the most important. And then from there, the appropriate referrals, medication, physical therapy, whatever equipment that they might need to protect their joints. So, yes, getting that diagnosis is the most important.
Yes, that way you can maintain and make sure they have a normal life and as close to normal as you can get with these types of conditions, because these are all affect the movement, the ability for people to function, and moving is one of the things people want to be able to do. So I'm just very, very thrilled to be able to talk to you about what the Arthritis Foundation has been able to accomplish and some of the work that they've been able to develop all throughout Connecticut and the nation. And I'm wondering, in terms of making sure people have access to treatment, tell us a little bit about how the Arthritis Foundation does that.
The Arthritis Foundation has a very active advocacy group.
Yes. Including you.
Well,
including Paula Haney.
I am privileged to be the advocacy chair for Connecticut's chapter.
Thank you for that work.
Thank you. We have worked for years locally. I've worked with you.
Yes.
I remember going to the bill signing for the first part of our step therapy
Yes.
bill, which we can talk about. But we do have every year our Day on the Hill. And we have, some years we have representation from just about every state to go to the Hill, talk to our representatives, talk to our senators about bills that impact people with arthritis. This year was our first year back in person after COVID, so it was a pretty incredible year. We got there the day of the first session. Folks were just getting back to their offices. But we had two very important bills that we were asking for their support, and that is one is called the Safe Step Therapy Bill, which is for those cases where insurance companies will quite often request that a patient take a lesser expensive medication regardless of what the rheumatologist has prescribed as a trial before receiving the medication that the doctor actually feels the patient requires. And this did happen to my son as well. When he was first diagnosed, his flare was so great that the doctor felt he needed a biologic, needed to immediately begin a biologic. The insurance company would not pay for a biologic. He had to start on a lesser medication, methotrexate, which did nothing for him.
And let's just go first to talk about the biologics, because I think that some people are not totally familiar with biologics. And so tell us a little bit about what a biologic is and what's the difference between that and a medication that has been developed by the pharmaceutical industry.
A biologic is actually made from some part of a living organism. It is a very large molecule, and it directly impacts the receptors that will increase inflammation. And that's the autoimmune part of the disease, where this receptor is engaged, it becomes active, and it starts to create this incredible inflammation, usually around the joints. It can also affect other parts of the body. So the biologic is able to go in and block that receptor so that we reduce the inflammation and thus reduce the joint damage. Other medications are made synthetically from other materials, and they can reduce the pain, but they're not so directly involved in the actual mechanisms of the inflammation.
And this is how long? I know the biologics have been around, maybe a little around 20 years?
Probably, yeah. I think in the 90s is when they really started.
Yeah, and I remember when I was working to as an advocate for Medicare beneficiaries, a lot of the controversy was over whether or not a patient could get a biologic. And some of the times we'd do an appeal because they weren't getting the biologic in the nursing facility, and they should have been part of that process. And so that was, and then there was something that's developed since the biologics that are not quite the same.
Biosimilars. Biosimilars are essentially the same as biologics. We always try and give me a clear explanation, and I'm not sure there really is. But basically, they are the second phase. They're still live organisms, so they're not synthetic. They're very similar. They are almost exactly like the biologics from which they basically come. But I think because they are a second level, they have not had to go through the amount of research and trial that the biologics have. The research is already there, the information is already there. And so for that reason, they can be a little less expensive than the biologics, but not a lot.
Yeah, I'm sure that. Well, I know that people are, when the biosimilars came out, I know that people are trying to get the biosimilars at least, and that was because the things that pharmaceuticals make just from straight chemistry does not really create the limitation of the inflammation that has to occur, and it doesn't follow the neurotransmitters the way that it would in a biologic, because that's just the neurologic receptors are more receptive to a biologic than they would be, or to a biosimilar, than they would be to a pharmaceutical.
And the Arthritis Foundation has taken a stand on that, and they have said, biosimilars are certainly acceptable if that's what your doctor feels that you can handle, but their feeling is that patients should know if they're getting biosimilars, there should be transparency and certainly monitored as to whether or not it is as effective for that particular patient as the biologic was.
This is absolutely fascinating. This is Susan Johnson. I'm here with Paula Haney, who is in charge of outreach for the Arthritis Foundation, which we're going to be celebrating today, 75 years of service to the arthritis community. But we are going to stop for these messages, and we will be returning with this fabulous information about arthritis and discussion more about what's going on with the Arthritis Foundation. Welcome back, everyone. This is Susan Johnson. I'm here with our very special guest this evening, Paula Haney, who is she's the Director of Community Outreach for the Arthritis Foundation here in Connecticut, and she's done amazing work at the Capitol, and I've seen her there, and we've worked on all kinds of different things together, and we're here now to talk about and to celebrate 75 years of service with the Arthritis Foundation. And I just want to say, I want to be able to present to you the citation that's from me and Senator Flexer, and I'm going to put this in front of us. And it's going to be from us, from the Connecticut General Assembly, and from Susan Johnson and Senator May Flexer. Be it hereby known to all that the Connecticut General Assembly hereby offers its sincerest congratulations to the Arthritis Foundation in recognition of 75 years of service to the arthritis community. The Arthritis Foundation has facilitated healthcare access changes that have helped people with arthritis live healthier lives through medication improvements and physical therapy care. The entire membership extends its very best wishes on this memorable occasion and expresses the hope for continued success given the 29th day of September at the Capitol. It's signed by President Pro Tem Marty Looney, Speaker of the House Matt Ritter, and Secretary of State Stephanie Thomas. So very, very good. This is great, and thank you, and well-deserved honor.
Oh, that's
And I'm
so
just
exciting.
very pleased that we're able to celebrate today with respect to the Arthritis Foundation's 75 years of service to people who have these mobility issues, and it makes our society better all the way around when people can get around.
That's very true.
So tell us some more about the outreach work that's been going on. I know we did a great job talking about the biologics and the biosimilars and the differences between biologics, biosimilars, and the medications that are just pharmaceutical medications that don't have that other component to them that is actually something that I think as we move forward with the human genome, this is going to be more and more something that is going to be more relevant in terms of treatment and therapy and actually helping people with the immunodeficiency disorders and also with the wear and tear type of osteoarthritis.
Yes, because there is, for the first time, there is very active research going on for osteoarthritis and possibly some medications down the road that can actually impact the progression of osteoarthritis, and that is new. That is going to be very exciting. I think that we have to realize how fortunate we are in the state of Connecticut, and I'm going to attribute a lot of that to you, Susan, because you have been so active in the health-related causes for and bills for our state.
Thank you.
But I can remember going to a lot of our arthritis national meetings and talking about the fact that we were one of the first states to actually pass the Safe Step Therapy Act. The problem is that it isn't a federal ruling. And that was what we were doing on the Hill, trying to make the Safe Step Act become a federal law, along with the what is called the Help Copays Count bill. And that is that's a big one.
That's
for
big.
folks.
Yes, it is. Tell us about that because that sounds to me like it's going to be a huge plus for the average person that has to deal with these things.
There are, for folks that are suffering from chronic illnesses and medications that are very expensive, you'll often see an advertisement that the pharmaceutical company can assist you if you have trouble paying for your medication. Well, what happens is, again, if you have a copay, coinsurance, which is even worse, there are pharmaceutical companies and other folks that can help pay that copay with you. The trouble is that's usually just a certain amount of money. So the person will start the year with this kind of assistance to pay for their medications, and then maybe 2 months down the road, that assistance is used up. And they are suddenly faced with paying the full amount of their copay or their coinsurance. Now, for some folks who are on your basic pharmaceuticals, that probably doesn't sound like a lot. But when you're on medications that can cost up to $6,000 a month, that assistance is much needed. And so what the Help Copays Act is about is making that assistance part of your deductible. So that once you reach your deductible in your insurance plan, then your medications are paid for. Well, what's happening is that assistance right now is not being used towards the deductible. So when that assistance ends, the person is held responsible for their entire copay or coinsurance until they reach their deductible, which could take time. So with this accumulator act, the money that is given, whether it's a gift, whether somebody else helps them, or whether it comes from a pharmaceutical company, all that assistance is to be counted along with what the patient pays so that they can reach their deductible sooner and not have to be responsible for the total amount of the copay or coinsurance.
And this would be required of all insurance?
Yes, and I think in Connecticut we have this in place, but I don't believe it applies to all employee or employer paid insurance.
So let's make a distinction here, because this is an issue that I'm really focused on, and that is the difference between the Affordable Care Act plans and the Connecticut regulated plans. And then there's the ERISA plans or the self-insurance plans. And the self-insurance plans don't have to go by Connecticut regulation. And they're also known as ERISA plans, the Employee Retirement and Security Act, Insurance and Security Act. And what's happened, that was passed in 1974. ERISA plans, of course, they have their standards, and they were created so that there would be a standardized type of insurance all throughout the country. And then they left the regulations. The state wanted to do more with the plan, and the employer opted into, or the whatever it was that opted into a plan, could choose an ERISA plan that is not regulated, or they could choose a regulated plan through the state of Connecticut. The unregulated plans are usually plans that are done by large corporations. The state of Connecticut, for example, uses ERISA self-insurance plans, but they do not create a high deductible. They do not do these things that some of the other plans do, where they have huge high deductibles, and they make it almost impossible for anybody to be able to get through the deductible in a particular year. So many of these ERISA plans, say for example, have $6,000 deductibles for every single person that's in the plan in the family. So if they get into some kind of say they need cancer treatment or something, it's almost impossible for a lower income person to be able to reach the payment of all the medical services in a year that go to up to the $6,000 deductible. And so what happens is it impacts the hospitals and the providers to the point where they don't get the money they should get, and the cycle is that once they don't get the money they need, then they increase their rates, and then it goes on to another cycle where the rates have increased, and then the insurance industry says, well, it costs more money now, and so now we're going to increase our premiums, and it's been going on and on and on and on for generations. And still, because of the complexity, people don't understand what's happening. In any event, it's an issue I'm working on because there's been a new suggestion by the Connecticut Business and Industry Association that we do as a small group association plans that would ultimately be mostly ERISA plans. And not many of the small businesses are going to want to go into a Connecticut regulated plan because they cost the premiums more. The deductibles are lower and it's more usable, but it's always the attractive lure of the low premium, high deductible plan that gets people, and it's what's gotten people here, I think, in our town insurance plans too, right here in Wyndham. So that's one of the things to understand is the differences, and I think sometimes people attribute these high deductible plans to the Affordable Care Act, which it is not. It's ERISA. And it's an ERISA plan. It's federally regulated, and the state has very limited capacity to regulate them. And then under the small business employer plan, those are Affordable Care Act plans, and they are subsidized. And so in the small employer business plans, if there are any kinds of things where the person can't afford the premiums or the deductible, according to the whatever rates they have now in Connecticut for the Affordable Care Act plans, they actually put themselves in a situation where that lower income person will get a subsidy from the Affordable Care Act instead. But you don't get that subsidy with the ERISA plans. Just saying.
And like I said, thank goodness we have Representative Susan Johnson to help us through the quagmire.
And I didn't mean to do that, but it's just I'm on fire about this, and I do want to make sure people understand the differences between the Affordable Care Act, the private regulated Connecticut plans, and the ERISA plans or self-insurance plans.
Yes.
Just saying.
No, it has to be said.
Yes, okay, but please go ahead with arthritis work. So please.
So those were our two main priorities on the Hill. And we're always looking for our representatives and our senators to join the Arthritis Caucus in order for them to be fully aware of all of the issues and
I'd be
how
glad
it
to.
impacts people with arthritis.
If you want a letter from me, you've got it. I mean, I'm
Okay.
glad to send it off to our Congressman Courtney and off to our United States Senators, Blumenthal and Murphy. And I think that well, Blumenthal and Murphy and Courtney all chaired the Public Health Committee when they were in the Connecticut legislature. And of course, Blumenthal took care of everything as the Attorney General, so
Oh, dear.
so he understands it all.
Yes.
But they were both public health chairs, and so I know that they get this, and they will be. I think they'll be good contact people. I don't want to speak for them, but
Yeah. Well, as of right now, I believe that there is only one. Well, I won't say that. Right now, the three that you have mentioned are all members of the Arthritis Caucus.
that's great.
So, and again, I say it over and over again. We are so fortunate in the state of Connecticut to have the representatives, the legislators that we do, because we are, in most cases, way ahead of the game.
That's great. And this is a wonderful thing. I love this proposal. This is a wonderful proposal, and it would be wonderful to be able to get rid of step therapy altogether and let the doctors make the decisions for arthritis and for everything else. I mean, because they keep moving back and forth. We got rid of step therapy for a while there, and then somehow I went off the Insurance and Real Estate Committee, and some of it's back now. Things that make you go,
Yeah.
But I'm coming back.
Yay! No, it's true.
Yeah,
I
they,
mean,
they put it in these little places.
you know, and the thing is that, you know, even in my son's case, you know, for that amount of time that he should have been on a biologic that
Right.
he wasn't, how much joint damage was going on?
Thank you. Yes.
That, you know,
Horrible. It's horrible because by taking that away down the road, they create a bigger problem and a more expensive problem for somebody, and it's really not smart. I mean, there's just these things, and I could never figure it out. Why would you do that when it's going to cost so much less in the long run
well,
to do
that's
this?
true. I mean, minimizing the damage and disability, and never mind the hospitalizations.
Thank you. Yes. All these things, joint replacements, all kinds of things. And while we're thinking of joint replacements, how does that work with osteoarthritis and some of the other types of arthritis? Is there different types of joint replacements for different types of arthritis?
I'm not so sure that there are different types.
Okay.
It usually is according to a person's makeup. Some people have allergies to certain types of metals.
Sure.
So usually, and now with our robotics and our ability to actually customize a joint replacement prosthesis.
Wow.
I mean, that's just amazing rather than, you know, just taking a generic one off the
Yes.
shelf, and now they can actually customize, especially knees, which is
I've
incredibly helpful.
That is huge. The knees are really the place where you see so many people have so much difficulty as they age, and having the knee replacements are something that can really revive someone's ability to move.
And it does take a lot of therapy, even though, you know, knees only bend and straighten. There's a lot of stress on knees, and you really do need a lot of good rehab after having a knee replaced.
And while we're talking about the knee replacement, before you get to knee replacement, sometimes there's things that you can do to mitigate some of the pressure on the knee, like using a cane or a walker. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
My goodness, that is probably one of the mantras that we have utilized for years. People who absolutely refuse to use a cane
There's so
because
many, yes.
there's a little bit of vanity involved, or I just don't need it. But it's amazing with the use of a cane how much you can improve your gait, which again, just like we talked before, how something at the ankle can affect the knee, can affect the back. The same with using an assistive device. If you take that little bit of strain off, you're not going to limp. You're not going to create issues at your other joints. So better to have that cane, and they make some pretty fancy ones these days.
You could use them kind of like a baton.
Yeah, a little dance step. So if you use that cane, you are going to take some of the pressure off your affected joint. And always remember to use it in the opposite hand.
Oh.
So if it's your right knee that's affected, you should be using your cane in your left hand. Unlike that, what was that show some years ago, the doctor who insisted on using his cane on the same side and was constantly limping down the hallway. I can't remember the name of the show.
I don't remember that.
Yeah, that was, I can remember everybody was up in arms because he was using his cane in the wrong side, and even after it got to the studio, whatever, he refused to change. I guess it became his signature movement. But yes, it's always in the opposite hand, and it will definitely take some of the pressure off that joint so that you can have a more normal gait pattern.
And what if both joints are affected? Would a walker be
a walker? Then you have to watch out with walkers. There's a tendency to lean forward a little bit.
Mm-hmm. But some of them now they're making them higher.
Back. Now, yes, they are. They're making them higher. Yeah. Loft strand crutches is another option, also called Canadian crutches. We were in England some years ago, and I was astounded. Never saw a walker anywhere, but I did see so many people using loft strand crutches.
Explain that, because I've never heard or seen that.
A loft strand crutch is one that it cuffs around the back of your arm, and it has a piece that comes out that you hold on to.
Oh, yes.
So it looks like a regular crutch, but it's got that arm piece. So you're not putting weight under your arms, which is always been the problem with standard crutches, is leaning on them. So you have none of that. You've got the support, and you can stand up straight.
Yeah, because it's really puts having that posture problem, especially as you age, and your back tends to come together more and more because you lose some of the ligaments in the back, right?
The discs start
to
dry
deteriorate.
Up a little bit.
Yeah.
We lose height.
Yep.
And it's a perfectly normal response to flex when you're in pain. It's a protective mechanism. It's a reflex. So the more you're in pain, the more you're apt to flex. We want you to be nice and straight.
Yeah, it's standing up straight, leaning back, practicing your gait, making sure you got the cushiony shoes, keeping those muscles strong. These are the things we must do.
And being able to take your medication and afford it.
Exactly, and that's also extremely, extremely important for the long run and for the health of our entire society, to make sure everybody can get around and move around. That's just a big deal, and it should be the way things are. And whatever we can do to make sure people can do that, we will be working on it with the Arthritis Foundation and Paula Haney, and I'll be working on it. And we've got a couple more minutes. You want to say a few more things? What words of advice can you give to folks about what they should be doing if they have a little pain? Maybe it's time to see the doctor and get an order, something like that.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many ways that we can diagnose what's going on with our joints, and if in fact you are in the throes of an autoimmune disease. So there's no reason why anybody should have to be in extreme pain anymore. Let's get to the doctor, let's get a diagnosis, let's get our treatment managed, and people now are so much more in control of their lives, and that's a wonderful thing. That's actually how I started out in the Arthritis Foundation, was developing a program of self-management, and let's take control. Let's take control.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Paula Haney, who's done great work here in town as a member of the Board of Education, Board of Finance, and also doing great work as a physical therapist, helping so many people with all kinds of physiological problems, and as the chair of Community Relations for the Arthritis Foundation in the state of Connecticut. Thank you so much for being here with us today. We really appreciate all the amazing work you do.
Thank you. It's been a privilege.